Being quiet at this point is really difficult.
Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to the Women's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. We've all started to think about businesses we could start. But where do we really start? And at what age is appropriate to start? Do you start at 5? Do you start at 50? And with me is Malla Haridat. And she created a company called Mom and Daughters, Inc., to help train mothers and daughters. And I want to find out a little bit more about this because I think it crosses all barriers for starting a business. Welcome, Malla.
Thank you.
All right, let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
What exactly is Mom and Daughters?
Mom and Daughters, Inc. is a workshop series designed to teach mothers and daughters how to think entrepreneurially.
All right, how did you start coming up with this idea?
Sure. I had a company for many years where I would run youth entrepreneurship programs for different companies and would work with them in-house to create conferences and after-school programs and workshops. So I worked for many years in the field. And I started noticing a trend happen between the male students that would graduate from the programs and the female students that would graduate. And one of the last programs that I can think of in particular before I started Mom and Daughters, Inc., there's a story which I think really tells this whole experience really well. I had 2 students who were in this pretty competitive business plan competition. At the end, the judges actually awarded both a male and a female first place, which was completely unheard of. We were all really excited because the students had done amazingly well in presenting their businesses. The male student had a t-shirt business, the female student had a cupcake business. When they left out of the competition, the male student did what I would see commonly happen. He went and told everyone and then called everyone that he didn't know. He called local radio stations, local TV stations, friends and family, his teachers, everyone that he could possibly think of. And the female student just told her friends and family that were there with her at the conference. Before they left within a 24-hour period, the male student already had a radio show lined up. He was actually going to be given free office space for 3 months, which was his biggest pressing need that he needed for his company. And there was even an entrepreneur talking about actually wanting to mentor him and take him under his wing.
How old were these students?
16.
They were 16.
They were
so
16 years old.
basically they were equal as far as
Correct.
age goes.
Age, education, family support, everything.
Okay. Continue.
Sure, sure. And so for me, the light bulb went off because I had been watching this trend happen for years where the male students would take the lessons that we were giving and they would go and figure out how to really incorporate it in their lives. Whereas as the female students, often it was just a great experience. They took incredible notes, but they didn't do anything with it. And I started thinking about what would make the difference, what would be that tipping point for the female student to get her to do something different. And then I look at my own personal experiences. I was raised by a single mother. I, at that time, actually found out I was going to be pregnant with my own daughter, and the light bulb went off. It's the mother and daughter connection. And it's the ability to make sure that I'm not only educating the young girl and giving her information, but I have to teach the mother as well because she needs to understand how to help her daughter really make the impact.
In the case of the young man,
Mm-hmm.
you think his parents helped him in pushing him?
I think so. I think, though, that it's part of our social environment, though, that even if the parents didn't help him, because I know many examples where parents wouldn't be necessarily helping the young male, that society will encourage that. Society really gives a lot of emphasis and a lot of room for young boys to test things and to experiment. And it's okay for them to hear the word no and continue. But for a lot of girls, even though we now have more women now that are being raised and they're learning more traits of teamwork and they're learning more different types of things of how to really express themselves well, we're still not reinforcing it at home. So there still is that over need to be perfect and to not make mistakes. And when you talk to young girls, that's often what the problem is. They have the idea. They have some of the same ideas to test things, but they're scared of making mistakes and not having the support from their family to test things out.
So in starting this business, what was the first course that you would teach? And do you limit it now just to daughters and moms?
So I get that question quite frequently. I think that there's room for a lot of groups to do this work, but my own personal background and my passion right now is really with mothers and daughters. So as long as you're a mother or a mother-like figure in a woman's life, we're open. The doors are wide open to young women in that regards. And there are three core things that I focus on. The first one is getting young women to learn how to take strategic risks and feeling courageous about that, feeling empowered, feeling really good, but taking a risk, which is not always something I think that young women get the chance to experience. The second thing is the importance of understanding her personal brand and being willing to tell that and share that story. And then the third one is getting comfortable with numbers. I hear far too often women complain that they don't understand numbers. You know, that's for their accountant to figure out, for someone else. I disagree. You need to have a very comfortable handle on how the numbers work so that when you do talk with an accountant or someone else that might be dealing more with it, you at least understand what they're talking about and they're not just informing you.
Now, what are some of the negotiation skills that you teach?
Sure. So the workshop right now, it's a 2-hour to a 6-hour workshop, and all of the activities are done through games. So there's one in particular where there's a negotiation game where you're given something that you have to negotiate between two pairs, and I set the dynamic up behind the scenes so that there's an unfair negotiation. And you kind of sort of sense it, but not really. But it's interesting, even with that, I think young women learn how to think creatively on their feet. They come up with a strategy for what works and what doesn't. And then even if you don't necessarily win the prize of becoming the best negotiator in the room, we take time to break down the strategies that were used so that everyone in the room can walk away learning, well, what did those that negotiated well do differently that you could do next time? Did they talk to more people? Did they try using lower numbers? Were they uncomfortable with the risk, which is usually what the biggest thing is that comes up.
All right. How do you address the risk factor?
The risk is done in several ways. The first activity that I've played with all of the students is an activity where they walk through a 30-day business cycle. And anyone that's owned a business knows that when you have a business, if you want to make money, you have to think outside of the box sometimes. So you can't just assume I have certain goods and products, I'm going to sell it at this price, and then I'll make my profit and then try to go on and do it again. So we set it up, it's a little like Monopoly, but we set it up so that you have to take risks. You have to be willing to buy more than maybe you're comfortable with buying it first on credit and test it out and see what happens. And sometimes you'll earn even more money than you thought, but then other times you're not. And then you have to figure out, well, what do I need to be able to do to recover? So the idea behind it is that there are all types of risks that I think that we have to take, but you want to try to think through them as much as possible with strategy behind it so that you're not just out there just tossing your money out in the wind. And that's what I think a lot of the people walk away with from the session.
From the time that you started this to present day, what have you seen shift as far as getting the word out there? Because now we have so much with social media.
Sure.
Does that really impact, or does it just another layer that you have to go through?
It's interesting. I know that this can really be a movement more than just a workshop, and I know it's going to take a lot of people to be able to help get this movement out there. So I've only started really scratching at the surface right now. The company itself does have, definitely has, we have our website, we have our social media, our Facebook and our Twitter and things of that nature. But I think we haven't really begun to even start to get to the critical mass of numbers of individuals that we can get to where the real impact can be made.
In teaching your class, do the students now go onto social media more to get the word out, or do they go back to the old tried and true?
Oh, we've definitely had them go onto social media. I actually, in one of my last workshops, I had a student who actually taped me in the class, giving part of the activity that we were doing, which at first the old school teacher in me was a little offended and a little thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't work. And then immediately remembered, who's the group that I'm working with right now? Of course, that's what they're going to do. That's how they communicate. And lo and behold, she has a pretty big follower base on her YouTube. She has a YouTube channel. And I was quite surprised. I actually got contacted by a few people who saw me from the YouTube video. So the younger generation totally gets how to be able to get the message out there. But they often don't understand some of the strategy behind doing it, that it's not just putting everything out there. It's thinking through what are the types of things that would sell your message the best and really present who you are the best. So I actually, ironically, have been working with her on that very topic.
Oh, interesting. 'Cause things have just changed so dramatically.
They have.
In 10 years, in 5 years even. It just is a complete evolution here. Are some people meant to be entrepreneurs and not others? Do you find that people just don't get it enough to say they're more for, what's the old adage, the 9-to-5 job?
Yes, I definitely think that there are people who are definitely designed to be entrepreneurs because there are certain qualities that they have. They tend to be very driven, very ambitious, usually have an idea of a product that or service that doesn't exist and a way of how they can really bring it to market. And the entrepreneurs that I see now, which has been quite fascinating, are usually very mission driven and seeing something that they can really affect change in some way for future generations. I do think that all of us have an element of that within us. It's just that some may be better suited to be at the forefront moving an organization or a company to do that, and others actually might find a better role in being, I wouldn't say behind the scenes, but being in a more traditional employee situation.
You triggered a question. I got to remember what the question was. So how does the individual come up with this, does the individual come up with this light bulb going off saying, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I'm more behind the scenes? Or does it something that just kind of moves around when you're doing the workshops?
Both. I think the goal for me with the workshops is to get people across the board thinking more entrepreneurially. And for some people that may show up in their workplace where they now feel more comfortable if their boss makes them do something that's sales-like, or where they have to negotiate and that they wouldn't have done something like that before. And for others, it gives them the idea to take something that they had in their mind before but never realized, oh, well, that actually could serve something, resolve a problem that people have right now, and figure out how I can make money in the process. Oh, let me try that. So it's not always a very specific linear step that people will make towards it. Sometimes they've been thinking about it and it is, but often it sparks an idea that they can then take out once they leave the experience and then go to the next step.
To your students,
yes,
moms and daughters, do the moms ever go off and start their own business?
I actually started a coaching workshop after starting this business, a coaching practice rather, after starting this business, because I had quite a few of the mothers come to me and say, well, I want to start my own business and I've wanted to for years, but I have no idea how to get started and where do I get help. And I had been teaching business plan courses for years, but realized that for a lot of women, they need someone to work with them directly. They need someone that can both hold their hand when they are not quite sure how to get to the next stage, but then to be honest, put a little bit of fire underneath them as well too when they're thinking too analytical. Women tend to be very good about taking notes of things and absorbing all of the information, but not always acting on things. So I enjoy that process of working with some of the mothers I've met at the workshops and getting them to really take action and again, take those risks.
All right, going back to taking the risks and taking the actions, what is the fear, would you say, holds them back?
I don't want to say it's in our heads, but usually often it's in our heads. And I think that there are situations that we've encountered, whether we were younger, experiences that we went through when we were older, or sometimes just not even realizing that you really can do it, and that yes, there's actually a whole tribe, a whole community of other women out there that will totally celebrate you. I mean, there's an entire planet that will celebrate you, but just finding out that there's others like them, I think, is one of the biggest revelations for a lot of women that are starting businesses to really realize.
When you go to start a business and you come up with a name,
Yes.
what papers do you have to file or patent or whatever for what you're doing?
So I started teaching, it's funny you would mention that. I started teaching business plan courses back in '98 and went through a very trial by fire of learning how to teach those courses. And back then I would have told you all types of wonderful information about whether you should get incorporated and speaking to an attorney or speaking to a lawyer. Now, since watching the entire industry and basically our entire business model do almost a 180, the suggestion that I have for most entrepreneurs is to use more of the lean startup method. Whatever the idea is that you have, figure out a way of how to get some type of prototype out to the marketplace, not your final product, but just something that works, and see, is there an interest? Are you getting buzz? Are you getting people saying, yes, I want this, I'm willing to pay for it, when are you going to get more? And only then, after you've gotten several checks from people, then go ahead and figure out how to be able to actually start the business. But for a lot of people, it actually makes more sense for them to just test it and see if there is a market, if they can create a market, and then if that doesn't work, then that's fine. And you haven't invested as much as you would have had you used more of the method of starting out first with getting everything incorporated, getting your office space, and some of the other technical details. Not to say that those are not important, but I'd rather you have money in the bank first. Once you have the money in the bank, you'll figure out which legal entity to start.
What's interesting now is that there's so many websites. You can put your product up or your idea, like Kickstarter. I know somebody who put his product up and he's got a lot of interest and a lot of money, but he needs this one little part to go to the next step. However, he was very successful. Do a lot of these entrepreneurs use Kickstarter or some other, like crowdfunding or something?
Crowdfunding is very popular, and I think for those that understand the power of their personal brand, that recognize that Kickstarter is only a way to really illuminate the brand that you already have, they're able to become very successful. And so what I mean by that is people that have been using social media to just keep friends and family engaged and interested in what's going on in their own life, very often will have a much easier time when they then take their business idea and then use those same platforms to try to raise money. But for someone who has never experimented, and again, that's that testing, that's willing to fail, willing to experiment. Do I get more views because I have pictures up versus I have content versus what are the things that are going to get my audience engaged? I think for people who have not tested that out yet, that's often where more times they struggle because they're not adjusted to recognizing the power of their personal brand and translating that and seeing how to get more interest and engagement with that. So it's interesting about how the more that you keep doing this and the more that you keep making mistakes at it, the better that I think often that people can get when they do decide to use some of those mediums.
All right. You've been doing this for a while. What is the success rate of the women who have taken your courses and started their own business? And at what age level would you say they basically fall into?
Sure. Women-owned businesses, I think the higher success rates that we're seeing right now are women that are between their ages 40 to 60. And often that's because they have a few years under their belt. They're seasoned. They understand their marketplace, they understand their personal brand, and they often tend to be the most open to coaching and willing to really being able to figure out, well, where are my gaps and how do I need to get help in order to fix those particular gaps. So I actually just recently won as a finalist in the Count Me In Awards Urban Rebound Program, which I'm very excited about. And it was interesting to attend the pitch competition where I had to share a 2-minute pitch about what my business idea was, which ironically, even though I do this for a living, was one of the most terrifying things of my life to try to get my whole message, my finances, my marketing, everything into 2 minutes. But I was quite fascinated that at that event and at so many other places where I see women entrepreneurs, the ones who are really, really earning the money, really figuring out how to take their business to the next level, often, not all the time, but often tend to be in that 40 to 60 age category. The women that I've worked with that have been successful, they're the ones that are willing to, and I've worked across the gamut with all ages, they're the ones that are willing to take a step back and realize there's some gaps that they have and they know they need to be pushed past those gaps. So I have one woman recently, I've worked actually with her for probably, I would say probably about 6 or 7 years, which is very untypical of most of the clients that I work with. And when she first got started, she has a business where she works with dog trainers to offer workshops and webinars and seminars. And when I first got started with her business, she refused to put her business online of doing webinars. She felt that if you're teaching other dog trainers how to train dogs, you want to do things in person. It makes a much better ability to be able to gather everyone together in a room. And I honestly have to say that she is probably one of the clients I am so beyond impressed by, because she's gone from a model of taking her business, which was solely in person, to now she has, I would say, a good 70% of her business online. She's increasing the numbers that she has at all of her online trainings, and she's finding new ways of being able to engage others that would have never been able to travel in the past to her business, to a place now where her business is really growing, it's flourishing quite well. So I think as long as women are willing to step back and realize that there are often things that they don't know, but I've got to take that risk and get that comfort level. So with her, before every webinar, we've had some calls where it's just been honestly just a confidence booster. What can I do to help you feel more confident to go into that call? Other times we think through every scenario that may happen and break down, well, how would you handle this? What's the worst case that may happen here? And then a lot of times we spend time thinking through the strategy. I don't want you to just start and just do one and not think through what's gonna happen for 2014 or what's gonna happen for 2015. How does this fit in with the overall process of what you're trying to do? So I think as long as women are willing to be open to that and get someone that they know is really gonna get on their case when they're being shy and they're not willing to take the risk, I think all types of things are possible. And she just recently did a online webinar where I want to say in the course of a week, she had close to 50 trainers that signed up in just 1 week, which is
Fabulous.
It's unheard of prior.
Where do you see a gap in product or services that, there's the senior market, you say 40 to 60, well, 60s and up are not dead yet.
Not at all.
I mean, my
Not
grandmother, and the reason I say it, I keep thinking my grandfather, my grandmother was after my grandfather for looking at this beautiful woman who's putting on her makeup. My grandfather just turned to her and said, "I'm not in the casket yet." So and they were already in their 80s at that point. Where do you see products or services geared to the seniors, or do they at all take advantage of this?
I actually don't think that's a market that's been tapped into, to be honest. I do have a hope that with Mom and Daughters Inc., someone had given me the idea to do a grandmothers and daughters workshop, which when I thought about it, I thought, wow, and my grandmother's no longer living, but I could almost imagine her doing that with me, or I can now imagine my mother doing the workshop with my daughter. And I think that would be tremendous. So I do think that there's huge room in this marketplace right now for those that are realizing they have an entrepreneurial bent, they have something to bring to the world, but they need some really specific help and guidance on how to be able to do that. I am actually at a loss right now, though. I can't think of any specific resources. I know that the SBA and SCORE have a lot of very targeted resources, but I actually can't think of any organizations right now that are targeting just that particular demographic you're talking about. And I clearly have my homework when I go home now.
Do you advise budding entrepreneurs to do an internship in the field where their product or services are?
Definitely. I worked with a woman several years ago who wanted to open up a spa-related industry and a spa-related business. And she had the most amazing bath and beauty products. She brought in samples. We all indulged and loved it, but she had never worked within the industry before. So the homework that I gave her during the time that I worked with her was not to go out and start the business, but was to do her homework and get herself really engrossed in the industry to understand how did some of the big competitors out there do what they did. I am blown away today that maybe 10 years later, she's actually the general manager for one of the largest spas in Toronto, Canada, because she took the advice to heart and went from an internship literally into now being able to run. I mean, she probably has close to at least, there's well over 100 people I can think of that are probably on her staff. So I think that there's tremendous value in being able to do that. And what was interesting for her is that she realized in the course of gaining that experience about the industry, how much that she really didn't know and what she needed to be able to learn. And then ironically, that entrepreneurship was not for her. That for her, she would do a much better job of being able to be the person behind the scenes, being able to help the entrepreneur live out their dreams. But she didn't necessarily, and she does an amazing job, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't necessarily her role, which I think that that's a huge success to see that happen.
What is the rate of ideas that come out versus the rate that actually get implemented?
I don't know a number, but when you first just said that, the number that came to my mind was 125%, which I think, I don't know if there's research that's been done on that, but I don't think I would be that off when I say that. The interesting thing about most businesses that are successful is that if you research back in their history, and their history could only be a couple of months to many generations, the business, in order to remain successful, probably does not look at all like what the original idea was that the owner had come up with to start out with. So I think that most business ideas probably should be trashed.
Is there any periodicals or books that you recommend people to read while they're going through your process?
Sure. I have a blog that's on the Mom and Daughters Inc. website that I definitely recommend to everyone to take a look at. There's also quite a few really great websites and a lot of great periodicals out there. Inc. magazine, for example, comes to mind. Success magazine, which is a magazine that I am absolutely obsessed with, to put it nicely, has amazing interviews with entrepreneurs and gives a lot of really great principles for how to live your life in a very empowered way, but giving you strategies also on how to be able to do it. And then I think that there are a host of really great entrepreneurs out there right now that are helping individuals if they're creative, they're helping individuals if they have, they want to start a health-related business, a service-related business. There's a whole host of people that I can think of out there right now, Marie Forleo, Tara Gentile, that they have these amazing e-magazines or things online that people can tap into as well. So.
This has been absolutely fabulous, Maya. I just can't tell you how great it is. And maybe I'll take a course. It's always interesting. The closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Sure. I would encourage everyone here that if you have a mother or a daughter to take a look at our workshops. We do them on a quarterly basis. And then I also would encourage all of the mom and daughters out there to really think about how being an entrepreneur could really help them in their lives, and just look to others for ideas and examples. And it's pretty powerful, some of the things that can result.
And thank you for joining us. What is your creative ideas? Love to hear from you, mom, daughter, grandma, whatever. Please write us here at the Women's Connection. Bye now.